We are now ready to begin. Did you like that? The creepy deep voice at the beginning of it for the intro video? Should we leave that in as part of our template?
Yeah, super cool. Super cool. It gives it like added depth, added dimension.
Right. We are there behind the scenes, folks. It's not creepy at all.
We're always there. Watching.
We're always there.
Listening,
watching. Yeah.
Dancing. Well, good morning. And welcome to the latest episode of Project Failure Files. This series is for anyone who managed projects for a living in any way, shape, or form. If you've been a project, program, product, group, operations manager, maybe you've owned your own business, all the above, wear all the hats, this weekly series is definitely for you. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, the founder of Collab Talk, and welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I explore favorite pains, project management topics, sharing our perspective on what not to do as you manage projects. And in each episode, if you're new to the show, we talk about the common pitfalls, sharing personal stories and experiences, and explore strategies and best practices to help you to be successful.
So in this episode, we are talking about establishing a solid foundation, creating a baseline, and the problems that will occur usually if you move forward without a baseline.
You know, Sharon, this really is a continuation of last week's topic about adhering to your process. Which is, again, we're both sticklers on that. We don't care if you like which methodology, which process it is, which framework, just have one. But creating that baseline and doing a full discovery is essential to any new project kickoff. In fact, I had a conversation with a client this morning where they were asking me questions, and I said, I have no way to answer that because this first project is our baseline. So unless you have some other data points sitting on the back pocket, you know, that you've not shared yet, like that's what we're creating here. And I'm sure we'll get into that. I'll share more.
Yeah. So, I mean, because without both of those things, do you really understand the scope of your project anyways?
Yeah, it's creating a baseline, doing a full discovery. It really is essential to any new project. And as always with this topic, it should be a fun conversation. And with all these episodes, please feel free to comment throughout the episode and share your experiences and any great examples or feedback that we may have missed. And if we don't catch your question and answer it live, we will follow up afterwards. We see all. We eventually will get there and respond to those directly.
So let's get started with some definitions. What is a project baseline, and how do you even go about establishing a project baseline?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple ways we could approach this, Sharon. I mean, I was thinking like generically a project baseline, it's that like the initial plan. I always say, I use the phrase, you've heard me say this again and again, like this is our plan of record. That's that baseline. That is the plan of record. It is all of the initial planning, the timeline, your budget, the schedule, your resource allocation for that. it's a reference point to know, are we meeting or exceeding this, or are we falling behind? What are those leading and lagging indicators of whether we're going to be successful on this project?
Yeah, AKA, you might hear it be called happy path. So if you ever hear somebody talk about happy path, a lot of times they're referring to that initial baseline of here's the expected plan we think will probably happen. It's kind of like when you travel somewhere. I don't know if you've ever done this. I literally travel all the time. And you go into your GPS and you're like, I want to get from here to there. And it's like, oh, absolutely no problem. And it gives you all the lines and everything. What it doesn't take into consideration is all the things that could potentially happen along the way while you're traveling. So, the happy path is, this is the plan originally when we mapped it originally, and we knew all the things that we thought we knew, but maybe we don't know everything about everything yet.
I can put it into, for those that are Gen Xers and younger, I can maybe put it in some terms you understand. In the Marvel universe, we are in a multiverse environment here. It's the golden timeline.
There you go.
Baseline. It's the golden timeline. Anything else, is a branching off of that timeline.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say the other thing to think about in we start talking about definitions around project baseline, is that it's also the initial set of requirements, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about this, about, how to get there and what you're going to do. But this is why it's so incredibly important at the beginning to really understand what you're trying to accomplish, what your problem is, how you're going to try to solve for it, and build around those initial base of requirements, is because that helps to give that initial baseline some solid definition.
I like when you say, understand what your problem is. What's your problem? What is your problem? Say that a lot to your clients. They love it.
I just did a presentation. I literally just delivered a presentation not too long ago that is called, What is Your Problem?
What is their problem, Sharon? Well, that's why I think the other, it wasn't enough just to talk about this, that the happy timeline, the golden timeline, but to also talk about the discovery process itself. And this is, you always say that I don't know what the actual saying is around planning, but if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That one I remember.
Mm-hmm.
But as part of that is the discovery process. That's why discovery is so critical to legal efforts, like to go and uncover all the data around that. Is something similar with this. If I'm going to go in with a new project, and if I take in the requirements, the thing that the client is asking, without fully understanding where are we today, I am not going to be able to build a plan that accurately gets us from current state to future state. You can't just base it off of, here's what we want. Okay, can I deliver that in 6 weeks? I don't know. Where are you today? So that discovery process, it involves going and gathering all the essential information about project requirements, stakeholder expectation, who are your stakeholders, and then get their expectations to start to uncover risks to the project. And then as you lay out that plan, how you're going to execute that, that all of those things together create that baseline.
Yeah, on the business analysis side of the house, just from a definitions perspective, one of the words you might hear is elicitation. So it's the idea of eliciting requirements or eliciting information. And this is also the time when we, to what you were saying, Christian, is, we talk about, what is the business needs? We talk about business rules. So do we have any rules, like at the business level, we need to follow, like policies, procedures, regulations, things like that we need to be aware of at the very beginning, so that when we're creating that baseline, we can take some of those things into consideration to know, hey, if something like this comes up, it's something we're going to need to deal with.
Yeah. One of the reasons why this topic too, that it is so, intentionally follows last week's topic of having that framework, that methodology, and holding to that, is because, creating the baseline, it really, it's important to make sure that you have things like crystal clear expectations of how the project is going to move forward. Talking about how we're going to monitor, how we're going to measure this, track the activities, how decisions will be made, so it's not just of the metrics, the tools, like we're using a project management software. Maybe you've got a cloud version, maybe you've got, Microsoft Project and you're managing to that, or some other third-party cloud-based tool that does something very similar. But also what reporting, what is the right cadence to approach the stakeholders and ask for help, to identify, communicate out, hey, here's a risk. It's now come to fruition. It's a reality. We need to go into our mitigation plan. Here's what we're doing. So all of that should be part of that framework, part of that structure. So you're not having to create all of that from scratch at the beginning of each project, but you're able to fall back on that framework.
Right. Yeah. Well, and also, think about like communication planning and what is the right way. Not only what do we want to give them, but what's the right way to contact people, so that as we're going forward, are you a person who likes email? Are you a person who likes chat? What's the best way to contact you? What's the best way to communicate with you, so that we can make sure that those communications are happening with the right people at the right time.
One of the biggest problems, and I'm sure, Sharon, you've never experienced this, but that especially if you have a larger project that's across a couple different divisions, maybe multiple clients, and so bigger than a breadbox project, where what happens as you start moving along is some parts of the organization, some of these business units are able to complete tasks a lot faster and they want to move on, that they feel like they're being held back by other parts of the business for that project. Or another flavor of that is that they then start coming with other modifications, other scope requests to extend that could threaten other parts of the business. And so part of that, again, going back to the baseline, having that conversation with them and letting them know, hey, it's great that you guys are ahead, or you've got these other things that you want to go and add in, but we have a process. We're going to go back and look at the impacts of these requests, these issues with the overall timeline. And so we're going to make it with full transparency to all of the stakeholders, not just going and splitting this off into multiple other projects, because that's a quick way to stress out a PM, is to try to pull them in multiple directions all at once.
I have so many good examples of that. I remember there was a project I was on. This has happened many times, but a specific example of one where basically I was given a project and they were like already halfway through, like putting some stuff together and working on, delivering this project. And they came to me and they're like, we need a project plan. And I'm like, haven't you already been working on this project for like 6 months? They're like, yes. Okay. So what do you have so far and what can I work with? Well, we have a spreadsheet and we've written down some of the things we've worked on so far, but we really want a project plan for the project. I'm like, before the project is over, maybe. And so I remember one legit test I was brought in was because they had a client that required that they delivered a project plan. And so they thought it was smart to wait till halfway through the project to put the project plan together. And then I was like, well, are you also wanting me to like manage the tasks going forward? Well, we don't care so much about that. We just want a project plan that we can deliver with it. And I was like, wow. And this happens, guys. This happens more often than we probably really want to talk about, is that we create a project plan that is the documentation of the project, not using project planning to prepare to create a baseline to then go off of. I've seen that more often than I really want to admit to.
Sharon, I remember having a conversation with you a few years back. I asked you the question at the time. We weren't working together or anything, just friends through the community. And I asked you, like, what percentage of your projects were failed projects that came from other people that we both knew. And you were great, like that you didn't say who those people were, where you got those projects. Sharon's very professional that way. And so she won't go trash talk, people that are screwing up, behind their backs. Like, she doesn't do that. But I just remember having that conversation of that, because I spent a portion of my career where I was like the cleanup artist. And so I was going in where the project is halfway through. It's amazing at how accurate you can be at the estimates for work that's already been done.
Yeah, no, in fact, there used to be this commercial. About this place that did haircuts, and then he's doing his normal thing, like a little barbershop. And then they put up this place across the street, and they popped up this little sign, and they said, "We do $5 haircuts." And the poor guy's sitting there sweeping the porch, and he's all by himself, and there's no customers because they've all gone to the $5 haircut place. And the next thing you see is him popping up a sign. I think it was a sign commercial. Put up a little sign, and it says, "We fix $5 haircuts." And all of a sudden, he's out the door to his $5 haircuts. And so from that, and this was many, many years ago, and we joke to some degree that, we fix $5 problem projects.
Yeah.
And this is where this whole thing of the project failure files came about, is because you and I have chatted so many times about the fact that people come in, and we will a lot of times come in and give recommendations. We'll do consultative, support and things like that. We'll be like, "Oh, here's what you need to do." And they're like, "Oh, I don't know if I can do that." They'll go off and do it. And they will call me back 1 year, 2 year, 3 years later. "Hey, remember you told me to do this?" And I'm like, yeah, we didn't do that. Here's what we did instead. Can you come fix it for us? And I'm like, 100% I will come fix it for you. But we fix $5 projects. So
that is, you should just say haircuts then for the inside joke. No, it's, and I've had that experience too. In fact, I was a former company, was in a different role, but I shared the same sentiment and I said to him that I reported to the CEO, and I said, it's getting really old and tired that I'm having to say, "I told you so many times. When are you going to instead start listening to me?" And and this experience, it was almost comical of some of the mistakes that were being made. It always makes me think of just some people. I got some family members, some siblings that did this mistake that you can tell them, like, "Don't touch the stove. It's hot. You'll burn your hand." And they look at you and kind of cock the head sideways and go over and stick their hand on the stove, which was a real thing that happened to one of my siblings. That exact scenario played out. I remember as a kid thinking, you're an idiot. What, like, Mom just said,
you feel
don't
great
touch
when
it.
they said, "You're right. It was hot."
Right. Yeah. And now we knew, we validated that we had the theory, we had the, and we went and, but that is something that I think it's very common as part of the discovery process, is to go through, and you're not just identifying, "Hey, here's what we want things to look like," but understanding and then talking about all of the risks. And maybe it's just that we have an overly optimistic view of project management. We go, "Here's the plan, here's everything executed," and we don't spend enough time. You're not going to know all this up front, by the way. It's going to happen as you learn more, but identifying and bringing to the forefront potential risks. When you move past it, great. But when you identify it, then and if this happens, here's what we'll go and do. A lot of times you can't know those things until you're executing on that baseline, that project, and then communicating that out.
And I think we have another topic about this, but I really feel like mature organizations have a really good practice around lessons learned, or retrospectives, or postmortems, whatever you want to call them. Those lessons that you have gotten from those other projects as you mature and kind of do more and more projects, you can come back and you can go, "Oh, we learned that lesson a few times and we need to bring that back." But I think you're absolutely right. A lot of times, especially, I know we do a lot of, modern work, cutting edge technology, things that are on the edge, things people have not done before. And so we don't even know that it's going to be a problem sometimes until we've done it the first or second time, and we can learn, from that experience.
Well, the failing to go through and create like that baseline, it really is the way to approach this. Thinking of it as, again, going back to my question, like what does success look like? It helps you kind of envision, this is what we're trying to go. That then as the project starts skewing, because of scope creep, because of a number of other factors, technology issues. A key engineer on this deployment been out sick extended period. I mean, all the other factors that are there. If you don't properly go through that exercise and not watching that, then what's going to happen is that you are going to start facing the issues around failed deadlines. You're going to have budget overruns. Most importantly, though, is that you're going to lose your stakeholders. If they start, they lose trust in the process, and as you as the PM on that project, it's really hard to come back from that. Certainly as a consultant, if you lose the trust of a client, it's not likely that you're going to have other future projects. They could even end that project, pay a fee, cut you short, bring somebody in like Sharon's company to fix that. And so there's a number of ways that you find yourself in that situation. Like one is skipping or rushing through that discovery process, paying it lip service, but really not doing the depth around to really understand that current state. And so then you capture vague requirements. You overlook risks. You don't even think about and identify those risks. You don't have a proper communication plan in place. All of those things can lead to confusion and delays in the project. So again, it goes up with that old saying, if you fail to properly plan, then you are planning to fail, which just makes me think about that. I go back early in my career, so much I learned from that project, but 18 months of planning and preparation over a weekend of execution. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of execution of other things leading to that point, of course, but the actual turnover of that, where everything came together, the most critical time was the 2 days where we turned off the system Friday evening and it was back on ready to go with customers, with our internal clients Monday morning. There's a lot of hairy stuff that happened over the course of that weekend. In fact, I think I've shared this with you, was just a little insight into it too, that where I went to sleep Saturday night, talked with the support team. There are people that were monitoring this, doing things overnight, and I couldn't sleep. I woke up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and this was before we had a lot of the conference calling technology, certainly not the video conferencing. We had a conference line that was very expensive, but I worked for the phone company, so we pay ourselves internally. But we had just a dedicated conference line that we just left open, which was again very expensive. But I dialed in at like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and I dial into a firestorm of issues, the conversations of risk mitigation stuff. And I ended up jumping in the shower really quick, getting dressed, and driving in the 40 minutes to go help out and work all day Sunday to make sure that we got it through. So that I just sharing a little insight into the war story. We properly planned, but I think that's part of this is that the reason why we were able to deliver successfully on Monday, even with the middle of the night, last minute, the problems, the scary things that popped up, the difficulties we ran into, we were able to mitigate all of that because we went through all that planning. We were prepared for that. We knew our roles. And so, and I was there just more to help with, like, how can I help? Kind of, there was nothing about my role being there in person. I could have never called in and it would have been resolved, but being there to help in any way I could, at the very least to communicate out, send emails, give status updates, jump on the phone with key stakeholders on Sunday once they woke up at regular hours, to help out the team in any way, but played into the overall process.
Yeah. I mean, I think about, I like a good analogy. I think about, I spent a lot of time in theater all the way when I was younger, all the way through college. And I think about, you were mentioning 18 months to prepare for, a very short implementation period. But I think about this, in the entertainment world, a lot of times, they'll go through 6 to 12 months of preparing, for something that might be on Broadway for only a certain number of presentations. And I think it's very similar, right? We think in the technology world, a lot of times we're like, why do we even need to do all this? Why does it matter? And can't we just do it? Can't you just click a button? I don't know how many times I've heard that. I don't understand why it's so much effort and so much work to plan, because change management is such a big deal. Variability is such a big deal. Risk is such a big deal that, when we think about like entertainment, you're like, well, of course they would plan it. You got to make sure all the staging's correct, the blocking's correct, the backgrounds are correct, nobody drops a sandbag on their head. Make sure, what if somebody's sick? I've got an understudy. I think that they prepare for those things. But I think in technology, we don't think about it that way. We think, oh, well, we'll turn it on and they'll just be okay and it'll all be fine. And, I think, having that baseline allows us to be prepared, like you said, so that when things go wrong, because we don't know what's going to happen, we are able to have the bandwidth to support it. We know what the plan is. We know who the understudy is. We know what to expect, so that hopefully no sandbags fall on our heads.
Well, that's the difficult thing about this. It just made me think of something I was watching over this weekend. As you know, I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan, and I was watching a YouTube video on specifically around the scenes shot in Rohan, and so you have the kingdom up on that hill, and so this was some background of what they did before and after. But it was like 12 to 18 months of building the real buildings. He was like, why isn't this just CGI? It's like, you can't through CGI recreate the sweeping views that they had from that. It was a real building on the top of that very real hill where they filmed so much of that. But it was like 12 to 18 months of building through. They started in the winter to get it ready for then the following fall to be able to film, so that it was dry in the valley but snow up on the mountains that were surrounding this hill, to be exactly like what was in the book. But all of that prep, the actors on scene, actual shooting of scenes, 8 days.
Wow.
So 12 to 18 months of prep for all that. I think it was 18 months, including all the teardown again, because part of the deal was this was very much far out in nature. There weren't even roads out to that location. And so they had to bring it all back to what it was originally, with all the native plants and all of that, to get it back like they were never there. And they did all of that. It's pretty incredible. But yeah, I mean, it's exactly like that. It's thinking about strategies for creating a comprehensive baseline of that. So one, you do need to go through and say, look, here's what we understand today with that project of record, the requirements for our current state, the project scope, the timeline, the budget, they all provide you with that reliable point of reference for then knowing, hey, are we meeting, exceeding, or are we falling behind, and then managing changes within that. And so the rest of it with the risk management, all of that is based off. How could you identify a risk if you don't know what the baseline is? Why is it a risk? Why is it not just part of the baseline?
Well, and how can you be prepared for a risk if you haven't identified the risk? And I think that's, the thing that a lot of people don't think about is like, well, I'll just deal with things as they come up. Well, okay, that's great if most of the things that come up are well known and you know how to deal with them and all of that. But what about the things you don't understand? What about the things you don't know? There are roadblocks that can legitimately put projects months and years behind had they been dealt with up front. And this is, I speak a lot about like data reporting a lot of times. And I'll say to people, they're like, I'm going to go, build this dashboard, like a BI dashboard in Power BI. And I'm like, that's great. Do you have the data you need? And I tell people, start looking for that data now, because in 6 months and 12 months, when you go to build that report, if that data is not there, you're now 6 to 12 months behind because you don't have that data, and it's going to take you 6 to 12 months to go get it. And there are legitimately roadblocks in technology that can do that to you, where had you identified them in the original planning period, in the discovery period, it probably would have been super duper simple to do something that then you would have had that information. But because you waited, now you're going to potentially have a roadblock that could be 6 or 12 months.
Yeah. Well, if you are properly documenting throughout your assumptions, and assumptions change as you learn more about that, it's going to change, as well as the various constraints. But there's and again, I'm sure you've never run into this, like I've experienced this, but where things have changed, but because they weren't, like I thought it was understood of why some of these constraints were, but because it wasn't documented, some of the stakeholders then pushed back on some of these constraints where this was never discussed. You never highlighted this. You never brought this up. It's like, I thought everybody knew this. Like, no, you needed to document that as part of that. And it's like, I understand the perspective, and for some of those the long ago projects, they could have been nicer in the way that they, to the young PM whose feelings got hurt around this. But that's one of the reasons why is you try to be as transparent as possible around all these things. That should be part of your change model to say, hey, we have, if at minimum, if you're as part of your communication strategy, you might say, hey, we have a weekly meeting where we're discussing this. Here are assumptions that have changed. Here are constraints that have been, new constraints of this new issue. It's part of the risk assessment of that. And it may be as part of your communication strategy is that daily you are sending emails of here's impacts. We're going to discuss this in our next weekly call, but here's the things that are happening in real time, because sometimes even a weekly meeting might be too late. People need to know in real time what's happening. Build that into your communication plan. Those are things that you can plan for. Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's see. Conducting a comprehensive discovery phase. I mean, it's the first and foremost I think of is your stakeholders. Are they actively engaged? Because that's where a lot of the discovery is. Like, you have your plan, you're building that out. We think this is what it's going to look like, and it's your stakeholders that say, well, not, we need this slightly different thing, or that's not entirely accurate of what we need and why, and here's these impacts. And so that is the most important thing. And one of the reasons why running a governance body, and I will always say that, hey, if you're silent in these meetings with all the stakeholders that are sitting in the room, if you are silent that we bring up this change, here's what we think the impact is, here's what we think the risks are. And if you have not done the pre-reading, if you don't voice an opinion during that, if you say, hey, I need to go and think about this more and come back, if you don't even say that, then 2 weeks later, well, we always knew we were going to be impacted. It's like, we had documentation of all of this. You never raised your voice. Like, I'm sorry. Like you're out of luck on this. You had those opportunities. That's something, again, back to, this is the process. You do what you can to draw information out of people, their involvement in projects. But if people are not actively engaged, who are supposed to be actively engaged, there's only so much that you can do, but you have to make it clear, here are the consequences.
Yep. I'm just sitting here thinking about, all the people who over the years, like, they come to all those meetings, they talk, they listen, they participate. I'm just like, so many people do exactly that. And then 3 months, 6 months down the road, they're like, what would be really cool? I can always tell you there's scope creep if it follows. Wouldn't it be really cool if, or something along that line?
Well, so I appreciate those those companies that go through like a feasibility study phase. You've got a proposal, you got a project. You think of it, I mean, most people think of like a feasibility study when you think of working in the public sector, for example, and there might be different government entities that have to review the, whatever their EPA looks at certain things, the whatever the standard bodies that are out there. But internally, you could do something very similar. We could say, look, here's what we think the scope is. Here's what we think the risks are. This is why we're doing it. Here's the executive sponsor for this. But it's the responsibility of each business unit to go through and do some degree of feasibility analysis of that to understand, hey, if we go and implement this new tool, this new system, this new service, here's how it'll change, like our weekly or monthly reporting, how it will impact from a support standpoint, like our end customers, and have a voice around those things. You need to identify and document those risks and that feasibility as best you can up front. You're never going to identify everything up front. That's why you have your change model in place. But you do your best. And then this goes back to our many conversations around, waterfall versus more agile. But if you're more frequently discussing those, going through that, it means that they're usually shorter meetings, but you are surfacing issues more quickly. And if you're able to do that stuff, the more that you're able to do that up front, then the faster, the less expensive, the less impact of those changes that you experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the more you can identify it, the more you can plan around it, the more you can prepare for it, the more equipped you can be. And I always like to say, especially with change management, rolling out projects, I think the thing that people always like start with it's always going to be happy path. And I promise you, it's very rarely happy path. Of all the projects I've ever managed or participated in, I don't know that I can name one that actually followed the original happy path without some need to mitigate some risk. And then it's just a matter of what level of risk and what level of mitigation, how long it takes. So I think it's better to go into it and say, there will be risk. There will be things that we need to manage too. How can we prepare for those?
I have done a couple projects that remain on the happy path, but they didn't include customers or partners and even internal stakeholders. So it was like a project, the scope of which was within a team where we owned all aspects of it, and we were able to do it without having to bring in stakeholders from outside. So we're able to plan for something, go and do that. But again, it's so rare.
So rare. Even with hackathons, like hackathons are like as core as they can get. And you still run into things that you didn't prepare for, didn't think about, roadblocks that, like happen right then and there. And sometimes you have to pivot and I just think it's better to kind of know what you're in for so that you can prepare and then deal with what comes at you. And that way you can be as successful as you possibly can with as little variance, right? In Six Sigma, we call it variance. It's as little variance as possible.
That's a great way to the benefits of having that comprehensive baseline and discovery phase. You're right. It's very few variances. It's so you have that overall project alignment. So it's a clear picture of what we need to do, what this project will look like. There's understanding between the stakeholders, the project teams, alignment with the plan and the business objectives. And if you have those things, you're more likely then to have solid communication, which means fewer misunderstandings, fewer conflicts around the process. And there's less uncertainty and risk, because it's even if you're identifying risks early and often, then you're able to make refinements to the plan to kind of keep things overall on track. And that's where a lot of, like, if you hold a risk that you've identified to yourself, don't tell anybody else, it's more likely that experience that risk, it'll explode into the next thing versus it's out in the open. Sunlight is the best disinfectant of risks, you know. But it also then allows you to, instead of being reactive, it allows you to be proactive. It improves your decision-making capability around the entire project. So you're able to make decisions based on what you see versus having to go and clean up when messes happen.
Yeah, it's the same idea. If I carry an umbrella with me, I guarantee it won't rain.
Right. Right. Well, and also, if you, it's on the opposite is true. It's like if you suddenly get like, oh, the federal government messed up on your taxes, and here's a rebate check of $800. I guarantee you that your car will break down. And Sharon, guess how much that brake will cost?
$801.
It'll be slightly over the amount that you got. You'll still be in the hole a little bit, but that's no good deed goes unpunished. That's the universe speaking. Well, just to wrap up here, thinking about some practical tips. When you think about like what are the tips that you would give for creating an effective baseline?
I mean, I think the big thing is really making sure that you all the way back to the beginning, right? Is use some sort of a tool to make sure that you understand, like write it all down, know what's coming, plan for what you can, take all that information and put it into something so that you can see it all in one place. To your point, right? The stuff in the sunlight, right? It's make it transparent, make it available, make it communicated so that everybody understands what is the happy path, what are the limitations, what are the risks, what are the assumptions, what are we trying to do and what do we have to work with, so that we're all, and we've said this in multiple episodes, we're all working with the same information, we're all on the same team, and we're all trying to accomplish the same goal together. But put it in some sort of a tool, write it down, document it. And I know I kind of joked about Excel earlier, but a spreadsheet is better than nothing. Like if it's in a spreadsheet, if it's in a Word doc, like that's better than nothing. But in a perfect world, I think it would be great to use a tool, some sort of planning tool. I don't care, once again, what your methodology is, but use a tool that's going to work with you, that's going to keep you on track, and that's going to work with the methodology that you've chosen.
Exactly. And every one of those methodologies, I mean, it's side by side with a change control process. So change management is so critical to this. I say all the time, almost every other episode I say, it's like the organization that is good at managing change has a distinct competitive advantage over all others. And it's something that is a worthy thing to strive for, is that we want to be the best at change management. And then as part of that, you have to put those two things in place. You've got your great baseline project plan, you've got your change control, your methodology all there. You then need to have a regular, as part of your communication, as part of your overall management, is regular reviews, both of the project, review of the project, as well as then feedback in and review of your process. Like, are we capturing things? Like, you don't have to wait to the post-mortem to learn from the experience. You can do a mini post-mortem around each phase of a project, or the completion of really difficult tasks as part of that overall, timeline. Anytime you go and do that, but have a regular cadence where you're reviewing, making sure that you're still aligned. Are we still on target with the changes that have been put in place, that we've accepted? How much have we slipped from that original timeline, and what have we learned from that?
Yeah, we don't wait till 20 hours into a 48-hour road trip to look and make sure we're on the right road. I mean, I know personally, like I'm constantly checking, are we going the right direction? Are we on the right road? Or what
More
time are we going to get
Sharon,
there?
Did one of us bring a wallet? Do we? Like, if I notice, I'm too much of my OCD kicks in. Like if I'm getting in the car, one of the first things I do is I check, do I have my driver's license, and do I have credit cards? Am I able to fill up the gas tank if we run out of gas on this trip, kind of thing. Like I just do that automatically every time.
Exactly. You prepare for the things you know about. And that's just it. That's the point of, bringing lessons learned into it and making sure you're staying on top of things. It's that whole idea of, okay, wait, last time I forgot this. Last time I forgot that. So you make sure you have what you need. And then when you get on the road, you make sure that you're on the right road.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, hopefully this has been helpful to everybody. And once again, I forgot to share the info, but if you've got more to add on this topic, hey, we'd always love to hear from you. You can reach out to Sharon and I out on X. Of course, you can on the Twitters, as it's sometimes called by the kids. You can always reach us. You can find us. Our names, we're all over the place on the interwebs. So you can search for us and find us. You can, of course, find a past episodes. This is, what episode number is this? And I closed the list here. What are we on here, Sharon?
I'm looking.
28. 28. Yeah. So you can find, this and the 27 past episodes all out on the YouTube under my profile, Buckley Planet. And then, of course, we also have our online community. So we've got it, multiple places out there, but go find community. Share with us if there's a community that you are very active in around project management and think Sharon and I need to be there. Let us know, please. Be happy to go join some other spaces and share more ideas. But with that, we'll be back next Monday and every Monday into the foreseeable future. Sharon, we are chained to our desks to do these every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific. And we'll be back next week with another topic. So hope you can join us.
Yeah. See you next time.
And eventually I'll kick off the video here. All right. I'm ready. We'll see you later. Bye. Yeah, I want to know. I don't know about what, but